Only about 13% of employees strongly believe that leadership communicates effectively. Let that sink in. That means nearly 9 out of 10 people at work feel like they're not getting the clarity, transparency, or communication they actually need. And yet, if you ask most leaders, they'll tell you they're open, honest, and transparent communicators. So, which is it? Because research from Adam Grant shows us that leaders consistently overestimate how informed and psychologically safe their employees actually feel. So, what leaders believe they're communicating and what employees are actually experiencing are often very different things. Gallup shows us the gap. McKinsey tells us that poor communication is one of the biggest reasons organizational change fails, and Brene Brown reminds us that clear is kind. But I think there's another layer to this conversation that we don't talk about enough. We say we trust our employees, we say we treat them like adults, but are we actually doing that? If we're filtering information, softening messages, or only giving them the cliff notes. And to be clear, this isn't about the information you can't share because of compliance or legal constraints. This is about everything else. This is about sharing what you can, when you can, and giving people the full context, not just a curated version of it. Because if we say we trust our employees, but we don't trust them with the full picture, what are we really saying? And if only 13% of employees feel leadership communicates effectively, this isn't a communication problem, it's a leadership problem. And I think for a lot of leaders listening, this might be one of those moments where you realize, I thought I was being clear, but maybe I'm not. And that's exactly what we're unpacking today. I'm bringing back Heather Redfearn to talk about what's really happening in corporate communication, what's working, where it's falling short, and where that disconnect between intention and impact is really coming from. Because communication isn't just about what you say, it's about what your people understand, believe, and trust. Welcome to the new chapter of the Her Resources podcast. I'm your host, Linda Misakadis, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this next season with you solo. This podcast has always been about amplifying women's voices, exploring the challenges we face in HR, leadership, and life, and sharing the tools and inspiration we need to thrive. This is more than just a podcast, it's a community, a space for us to learn, lead, and lift each other up. Welcome to this new beginning. This is the Her Resources podcast. Let's get started. Welcome to the Her Resources podcast. Thanks for joining me in the studio today, Heather.
Thanks for having me, Linda. I'm really excited to be here with you today and talking about this topic. It's going to be a good one.
Me too. This is always one of my favorite conversations because for as long as I've been working in corporate America, communication always seems to be at the crux of so much and yet is so overlooked. It's an area that we think we're doing really well, but we're clearly not doing really well. And so I can't wait to dig into this with you a little bit more today. And I'm curious from your perspective, why do you think leaders believe they're such strong communicators?
I think that's a really great question. And what I would come back to you with is, are those leaders asking for feedback? And are they asking whether people understand, kind of going back and saying, so what did you just get out of our conversation? And not, I never would want it to come off as a test. They're not testing people, but they're testing.
Right.
They're testing themselves. Like, hey, was I just clear? What did you understand? Tell me, say it back to me a little bit because this is so important to me. I want to make sure that I was clear. And, asking for feedback, I think, and I don't want to say this for all leaders. I think there's some leaders that get where they are because they have a strong ego and that gives them the confidence to get them to that level where they're at. But, sometimes it means putting that ego aside to say, hey, how do you think I'm doing? And also, if they could rely, if they have a communication team in-house to get their feedback.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
you started at the beginning talking about psychological safety. That
Yeah.
means that leaders have to make sure that these people aren't just yes men and women, that they will tell them the real thing, tell them the real deal. So if they provide that psychological safety to people to be able to tell them the truth, hey, this wasn't clear, or I need more information on that, it would be even better.
I completely agree with you on that. And I think it's also kind of thinking about the I said it so it's clear mindset. I think sometimes that we get caught up in believing that because it's clear to us and what we think we're communicating or even how we're, because now the buzz that I'm hearing from a lot of leaders these days is um I- I'm uh I'm not scripted, that I'm speaking from the heart. But I wonder sometimes if that's really what's happening, and or is that just what they think is happening? So it's a lot of that perception, right? And being able to maybe do a little bit of self awareness and looking at ourselves, and maybe even if somewhere were saying that to me, would I understand what was being said? Because I do think it's that whole idea of we think we're being clear, but are we really being clear?
And, I would also suggest that being prepared doesn't mean that you're not speaking from the heart. Um,
Yes, yes.
like
That's such
really,
a good point. Yeah.
and, it's not about scripting people, but, if you go into something knowing I've got these 3 points that no matter what, I have to get these across, and preparing and, speaking at home into your mirror, speaking at home to your spouse to say, "Hey, what did you for those really important conversations, to me, being prepared shows a lot of heart because it shows that you care about the receiver.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That there is that idea that I love what you said there, that being prepared doesn't mean that you're not speaking from the heart. And sometimes the best way to ensure that you're completely clear is to maybe be a little more scripted so that you make sure that you hit on those key points. And so it is kind of like one of those challenges I think that we see a lot of times. I'm curious on the perception gap. Why do you think that we see such a big difference between leaders versus employees and having a completely different experience? Because I don't know about you, but I've walked away from meetings so many times where the leadership side of it thinks that, wow, we knocked that out of the park. And then you're listening to the chatter in the hallway and they clearly missed the mark. So, why do you think there's such a gap in that perception?
I wish I had the full answer to that, but what I would say is there's a few things. I think often leaders will speak in terms that don't resonate with employees.
Okay.
Um, you know, data, financials, what really can drive a business. And sometimes employees just want to know, "Ha- just is my job safe for the next few years, or, whatever the topic at hand can be. Uh,
Right.
Also, I've seen that when it comes to change, and to me, everything is change now. There's no business, change management. I believe in it wholeheartedly, don't get me wrong. But I think it's so constant now that we need to come up with another name for it. Um, but often those leaders have a preview to what's coming. They have gotten used to whatever's coming ahead. When you see like a change curve and they're so much further ahead, but the employees are just
Yes.
out over here. So, um, I think that I've had the pleasure of working with many very empathetic leaders, but because they're so further ahead in that change curve, that it's hard to bring them back. Um, so, I don't know if that hits a bit on answering
Yeah.
the question, but I think that, there's different things at play for everything from how employees want to receive information, to, um, people giving feedback to those leaders ahead of time. And are those the right people? Are they really challenging those leaders in a positive way to help them come to the best end result possible? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you said there, and especially on that idea of the change curve, because you're absolutely right. I also like your idea that we probably need to change from change management because it's more of a constant these days. So, how do you possibly stay ahead of that? But what I liked about what you said on the change curve is that is a really good call out because leaders often are already thinking maybe 3, 5, 10 steps ahead in the organizational design, development, direction. They're the ones who are at the boardroom table. They're making these decisions. They're looking at the company from a holistic view. And so they've got a much different perspective on what is happening, why it's happening, and how to go about doing it. Where the employees, to your point, they're kind of only seeing it through their lens. How do we close that gap a little bit? Like, is there a way for us to maybe find a way for leaders to communicate slightly more effectively because there's only so much they can do. I don't put this all on the leaders. And then how can we maybe encourage employees to receive the information maybe in a different way?
Um, I'll probably repeat this phrase several times while we're talking, but for me, it's really about having open feedback. And, those leaders are, doing the best that they can. And if people around them are telling them they're doing great, and that's all they hear and that's what they
Yeah.
believe. And it only comes out during, let's say, a survey when people feel more, uh, comfortable to be able to tell their
Yeah.
truth. Um, I really encourage leaders to get out in front of employees as much as they can and really figure out who in their organization that they can trust to tell them the truth and keep going that direction. And I would like to believe it's people from the communication team that can be those people and the HR team, because I would say that we're most connected to employees at all levels. I think pros and cons, if they're doing a good job, they have made connections at all levels of the organization, and they're continuing to check in on those people to say, hey, what did you think of the all hands today when our president was speaking, what did you think? When so and so was speaking, what did you think? And then bring that information back to the executive table to say, listen, uh, this doesn't include names, it never will. Um,
Right.
but I need you to know that this is what's being said, and I'm going to partner with you so we can do better on it the next time. So I think you have to have leaders who are willing to take that and just understand
Hmm.
it's not a criticism, it's an opportunity for continued improvement and continued building of trust, because when the C-suite or any leader is communicating and doing a good job, that just means that their trust is going up and up. And that's what you need because, again, a change is happening. You want your employees to do something fantastic and bring all the best of themselves to the table. If they trust you, they're going to do it. If they understand where you're going and why, you have all of the best of them, which is what ideally we all want.
I love that advice. And I'm wondering if what you were just talking about there, Adam Grant says that leaders overestimate how informed and safe employees feel. And in that Gallup is saying only about 13% of employees feel communication is effective. But I'm wondering if there are a few things that you said there that really jumped out at me as well, as far as the responsibility that employees have. And I think that we're in a weird time right now because everybody's has a little bit of uncertainty about the future of their jobs and, what's going on, probably more than any other time. But this is not something new. I've watched this for a long time where employees aren't willing to be open, honest, and transparent in that feedback. And so when they get corporate surveys or different information, they're just saying, yeah, everything is great, everything is wonderful. And even if you have a small percentage of those people who are willing to, lay it all on the line and say what they think in those, that gets muted by the fact that the majority of the employees are just kind of going through the motions. So, one of the things that you said there that I thought was really intriguing is this idea of getting out there, especially a communications team, and having those conversations with the employees to get their real, honest feedback. How do you help encourage them, though, to be open and honest in those situations so they don't feel like, well, if I say what I really think, there won't be a blowback on me?
Um, I think that you have to create these relationships with people, whether you go to them directly or you even sort of use key managers that you know are reliable, are, optimistic, but and I say optimistic, I never want to confuse anybody what I mean when I say optimistic, because saying the real things and being optimistic at the same time. I don't, like you say, I don't want somebody just to throw flowers. Oh, everything was great. No, tell me the real things, because we so want this to continue to be better. Um, so I think, it's a combination of sort of creating this network behind the scenes of people that you can reach out to, that are going to tell you the truth, whether it's at an employee level. Not always easy to get to the employee level. Let's say if you have people on the front line that have no emails, but so that's why I also suggest managers, because to me,
Hmm.
that first level manager probably has the most trust of their employees in the entire organization. They're gonna
Yeah.
be more trusted than the CEO. They're gonna be more, that's why for me, you at the beginning, you talked about different sources like Gallup and, McKinsey.
Yeah.
I turn often to Gallagher. They do an annual report. They're what they call their state of the sector.
Uh-huh.
Glancing to my notes because I want to make sure I get
Yeah.
right. So the most recent report from 2026 had 1,300 professional HR people and communicators answer their survey. When they were asked, what is the biggest barrier to communicating effectively? And now you're going to say, Heather, you're contradicting yourself, is 87% said manager effectiveness was the biggest barrier.
Oh, interesting.
And so they say that they lack the capacity. That doesn't surprise
Okay.
me because I think
Yeah.
so much of that first level management, and they lack the skills. So for me, what that means, it's an opportunity. If they're lacking the skills, as long as they have the will, then there's an opportunity to go and help them, provide them with manager toolkits, not just email, click, send, I did what I have to do as a communicator, but say, we're going to have a meeting. I'm going to walk you through this manager kit. Here's the key messages for your employees. Here's the Q&A. And oddly enough, I'm thinking back to what you said about scripted, but we need to help them have a consistent message. So if I'm a manager in store number one that's, on one side of the country, and then there's a store number two on the other side of the country, the essence of the message doesn't mean they have to say the same words, but the essence of the message is the same. So that in today's connected world, if I text my buddy on the other side, or I'm on Facebook or Insta or whatever it is, we heard the same essence of the message.
Hey everyone, we're the Her Resources podcast, where women share real stories, real lessons, and the resources that help them succeed. We're always looking for inspiring women, business leaders, creatives, educators, and changemakers who want to share their journey and empower others. If that sounds like you, we'd love to hear your story. Reach out to us at contact@herresourcespodcast.com and let's start the conversation. Yeah, I like that. Well, and what I liked about what you said there too is this idea of creating these kits, talk tracks, helping. And to your point, don't just email out the link to where you can go find the information, but actually truly prepare, especially for big stuff. Like the little things that are coming. But if we're making a major change in the organization, whatever that might be, I remember one of the organizations I worked for back in my earlier career, and I loved that we had done something like that when we were going through a major change after a merger with multiple companies and the impact that that was going to have. And we actually did take the time to sit down and do some manager training and prep them up and make sure that they had the talk track and the skills that they needed to kind of manage through those difficult conversations, and even gave them some objection handling type of skills. So, what happens when the employee says this? Oh, well, here's a way that you can respond to that. But it gave those managers that confidence to have those conversations with those employees. And to your point, when employees understand, even when it's bad news, they definitely are going to be far more supportive than when they don't understand and they're making things up in their own heads, right?
Yeah. And, you touched on treating people like adults and not sort of
Yes.
sugarcoating or watering down the message. I think that's really important is that, yes, we're all in the workplace, we're all adults. Sometimes we're going to look at messaging so it gets across in a way that's clear and people feel still inspired by what can come in the future in those times where the news isn't great because they happen. But I think it's so important, like the behavior of the organization in terms of how you communicate, it inspires trust because especially in those tougher moments, because people will go back and say, okay, well, that wasn't great news, but at least I know what's going on. Or, okay, at least I get it. Sometimes that's the
Yes.
most you can hope for, Linda. You know, that's
It is because and that's part of being treated like an adult is acting like an adult as well, right? So if you're going to treat me with enough respect and you're going to share that information, what am I going to do with that? So I could go back and maybe act maybe less adult like and just complain and call all my colleagues and now we can all complain together, or I can process that information in an adult like way to recognize they trusted me with this information. It's not great. I don't love it. And this is the emotions that I'm going to go through, but I can handle it like an adult would handle those situations. Even if you have that moment of breakdown, like we all do, the emotions get the better of us.
sure.
And we go and complain to our friends for a moment, but then we bring that back in. And now we have a decision to make because now you have the information you need to determine maybe I don't want to stay with this organization anymore based off the information that I had. Or maybe I need to start looking at a different part of the organization that I want to go and work in. There's a lot of opportunity there when you have information to make your own decisions instead of kind of finding out that something is being done to you, right? That's an opportunity for you to use that information in a way that can be positive, even in the light of negative information, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that. Can we talk a little bit about when we say intent versus impact? Because I don't think that any leader comes in with the intention to create a negative environment or even to have employees leave a town hall but sometimes you have that what my intention was, but what was the actual impact? Can you talk a little bit about like what the difference in that is and why that's important to think through it?
Absolutely. I think that there's such a fine line there that it can be, I agreed with you. I think most leaders have great intentions. They want to do well. They want their people to do well. That means if all of that's in place and the organization is also achieving. Um, but sometimes it can be like a missed word or a missed, they're in front of everybody and they give an example, they're not reading the room, and that can happen. I can remember at one point in my career, I worked at an organization that they were having a tough year financially, and they announced cost constraints. It's funny, I still remember the word. So we weren't cutting costs.
Yeah.
There were cost constraints, um, and, um, and I met, one of the top leaders in the hallway. I think there was some kind of communication that had been sent out regarding, what we would stop, where we would be cutting costs. It didn't say cut costs, but, that's what it meant.
Yeah.
And the person said to me, "Heather, I don't understand why people don't get that we need to do this." And it was bigger than me, and it came out so naturally, and again, I had psychological safety with this leader, because we don't tell them. And then it was, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "They have their results for their location." It was a type of
Mhm.
business that had many locations from coast to coast in Canada.
Okay.
And so they had complete insight on what their results were for their location, but say on the other side of the country, they didn't know. So their part of the business could be going very well, their results could be going well, but sometimes we have to take one for the team. And it was one of those situations. So I said, they have their part of the business, they have a view on that, but we are not talking to them about how the organization is doing as a whole. We're not telling them, uh, we're on budget, behind budget, in between, because we don't need to go into minute details. It's not that it has nothing to do with an intelligent level. They just don't need
Right.
that level of information. But tell them,
Yes.
are we on budget, behind budget, red, green, yellow? Um, same for sales. Give them that much information so that when this type of moment happens, well, they kind of see it coming because they've been seeing these results. So
Right.
to get back to your specific question about intent and impact, the intent
Mhm.
is really good. That executive wanted the employees to have information, wanted them to be able to react when needed, to react in whatever way, want the behavior to follow the situation. But I gave that person an aha moment because I said, "We're not telling them." And it wasn't bad intentions. It was just like, "Darn, like, you're right,"
Yeah.
which I didn't take pleasure in, but it allowed us to get to a new way of communicating after that.
Mhm.
You can bet
Yeah.
every single time that there was a communication coming out from his office, there was, "This is how the business is doing. This is," and it wasn't long, by the way, there was, like, 3 main KPIs that were followed with high-level results, and that was it.
Yeah.
So, to me, like I say, the intentions can be good, like, and the impact doesn't always match, and I think you have to really look at it to understand, okay, what's going on and try to find ways because they can be a series of things like that, not just one answer.
That is so true. Well, and that's a good lead in that I think that oftentimes that leaders communicate decisions, but they skip the context behind those decisions, right? And so kind of to your point when what you were describing there is yes, we have cost containment and maybe my area is doing well. Maybe we've been containing our costs really well, but to your point, there are other parts of the business that are not. And so we are needing to look at that across the board. But again, because leaders have usually the ones who are communicating, if it's coming from the top down, they have all the information, they have all the context, they know why we're making the decisions that we are. And so they're only communicating the what, but they're forgetting to communicate the why.
And this is one area that is probably one of the most important areas to me. Um, it's something that I've constantly brought back, whether I've had, my clients or my corporate colleagues. We have to say the why. And, you know, if we talk about moments of change for a moment, a while ago, I learned something that stayed with me. The human brain is wired to perceive change as a threat. It's
Interesting.
also wired to receive information as a reward. So
Okay.
when we when some people can criticize or inside their head think that person's so difficult, whenever there's a change, they always resist. It's it's biological to a certain extent. Our brain just
Yeah.
does that. So, you know what? Reward your employees. Give them context. Help them understand. Help them understand how they contribute to the bigger picture because they will feel rewarded and they are going to, again, rise to a challenge and give even more than you might expect. And, recently, I know you see my posts on LinkedIn, Linda.
Yes.
I try to post fairly regularly, and I had one post about this topic, and clearly it resonates with people because I said you need to give context every single time. I had
Yes.
That was my best performing post. I had over 34,000 views, which is a lot for me.
That's fantastic.
So,
Yes. So it hit the mark.
it hit the mark. It's clearly
Yeah.
people want this context and they respond to it. So, you know, I think it's really, really important. And I tend to think intention over impact. I think the intention is good, but they, like you said, often are so many steps further ahead that they forget to slow down and say, okay, why are we doing this? People need to understand.
Yes, exactly. No, and I think sometimes leaders think, well, I don't have to justify those decisions. And it's not a matter of justifying the decision. I think it's simply communicating the why behind it and then allowing the employees to process it because to your point, I may take what they say as a very negative. I might not I might read the intention much different. So the impact might be much more negative for me. Someone else might take that information and say, wow, this is really amazing. I'm so glad that we're heading in that direction. This is how, but it allows the human, the person, the adult to process on their own because leaders aren't responsible for how I react to it, but they do have a responsibility to make sure that they're sharing that information with me and they're giving me the why and they allow us to understand the context behind those decisions, and then it's up to us as employees to determine what we're going to do with that. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. You sort of bring people along with the journey. It's so interesting to me when you said, I don't know if you saw it on my face, because when you said, I don't need to justify, I was like, oh,
yeah,
I never
yeah,
thought of it that way. Because in my mind, it's like, no, bring them on the journey with you.
right,
Bring them on the journey.
right.
So absolutely, and it's interesting. I was recently brought in by one of my clients for a file that was to overhaul their employee handbook, and
Okay,
there were different parts where you say, "Let's explain why it is this way." You know, let's not focus on punitive language. What happens if you do not follow the rules? Let's take a
yeah,
or two to explain why it is this way, why health and safety is so important, why you need to wear this PPE because you're going to be
yes,
protected,
yeah,
care about you being safe at work. Um,
mm-hmm,
Instead of focusing on if you do not comply with this rule, this could lead to up to and including
yes.
dismissal. So I think people. How do people want to be communicated with in 2026? It's not help them understand the why. And like you say, at the end of the day,
Yes.
they'll make the decision whether they agree or don't agree. They're allowed.
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, and what you were describing there a little bit too is when we think about that fear-based leadership behaviors, where we see that coming in where it is, and it's more of like a control versus trust, I think is sometimes what comes into play. I'm curious, in your opinion, what do you think leaders are actually afraid of if they were just providing full transparency in the communication? What do you think makes them afraid of, instead of being transparent, they tend to filter. So they're like, well, I'm only gonna like as if they were telling their children about the dog passing away. And so they filter the truth behind all of that. It's similar in sometimes in business where they think, well, less is more, or if I give them too much, they might have this reaction. What do you think leaders are afraid of?
I think there might be a few things at play. I think some leaders are genuinely afraid of saying something they're not supposed to. So I know
That's a good one.
at the outset of this conversation, you talked about transparency and you mentioned,
Mhm.
"Hey, this excludes things like, let's say, an acquisition where there's
Yes.
definite legal strategy and you can only announce it at a certain time or else you're in breach of a DNA, or you're in
Yes.
of a confidentiality agreement."
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so I think, leaders wanna perform well. If there is another
Mhm.
level of leadership above them, they want to come off looking good in front of their boss, so not too much. Then I think there are some leaders that potentially are filtering because they just want everything to be smooth and they don't wanna have to,
Mm.
you know what? They have their own deadlines, they have their own um, performance. They're trying to hit their targets. And if they just don't rock the boat, then there's that much less for them to take care of. Um,
Yeah.
and that's an interesting one because I don't think it's right, but I can kind of understand sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I don't disagree with you. And it is hard. There's lots of different facets to that. And to your point, I do think that we don't give leaders enough credit for the standpoint that they are afraid that if they share too much, what the impact to that will be. And I did just specifically call out. We're not talking about
Yeah.
exactly what you said. If there's an upcoming merger or an acquisition or anything that has to be kept confidential or there's legal constraints, then obviously those leaders need to be very restrained in the amount of information that they're able to provide. But for things like, we're rolling out a new technology platform,
Right.
and here's the impact that it's going to have to everyone. I've never quite understood the logic in wanting to filter those types of communications and those decisions because, generally speaking, you get far greater buy-in, even for the people who are resisting the change or don't like it. There's still greater buy-in because at least they have the information, they understand the why. They don't have to agree with it, but they understand it. And so I think that's where it happens. But I don't disagree with you. It is hard in a leadership role to determine how much is too much and then what can I really say without potentially impacting. And we forget everybody reports to somebody. So
Yeah.
those they are concerned about that from a perception of their own bosses. You're right.
But, if I take your example of a new tech platform that's being rolled out, I mean, I mean, my advice would always be, you do the before, you do the after. What's the impact to the employees? Be upfront. The sooner, we sort of rip off the Band-Aid, the better. And, at the end of the day, everybody's, like we've said, they're adults. So either you want to be in or you want to be out, and we can't control that. So, obviously, I'm a proponent of as much transparency as possible. And, there's moments where people's reactions don't belong to you as a leader. You
Very
know,
true.
what you owe them is as much transparency as you can offer them. And after that, how people are going to react. It's not a lack of caring on my part, but it's just
No,
a matter of putting in your own boundaries because there's only so much you can do. If they're upset about it, that belongs
absolutely.
to them.
It does, and that kinda comes back to that whole treating employees like adults. I am kinda curious your thought because obviously one of the, unfortunate situations that's happening a lot right now is the impact of AI, and then the layoffs that are happening as a result of that, and we've seen a lot of press about how different organizations have communicated layoffs, and now there are legal ramifications related to layoffs. You have the WARN Act, you have different things that you need to take into consideration. So it's not like the leader could just get up and say, "Hey, by the way, just want to let you all know that we're laying off 100 people tomorrow," type of thing. So that you have to be thoughtful. But I'm just kind of curious your thoughts about, is there a right way or a wrong way to communicate those types of major organizational shifts that are going to have a direct impact on employees' lives and livelihood in many cases? I'm just curious your thoughts and what you're hearing in the communication community today about all of that.
To me, there's absolutely a right way to do this. Um, in my career, I probably have done those type of files more than I would like.
Yeah.
It's obviously really hard on the people affected. The
Hmm.
people that manage those things, I'm not getting out a violin or anything, but it's difficult.
It
It's
is.
it's rare. It's rare the people that could really handle managing those situations well. Um, to me, when I say there's a right way of doing it, um, you want to understand, back to context, why is the organization doing this?
Hmm.
Um, to me, I would always push back on, we're doing this because of costs. Because to
Yep.
me, you can go and get money in a lot of different places.
Hmm.
If an organization wants to save money, they can find a lot of different places to go and save money. So I would push back and say, "Okay, what else?
Hmm.
Not give me something else, but let's
Yeah, yeah.
dig into this further.
Hmm.
What's changing in the organization that means we can do without these positions that
Hmm.
you have decided need to be transitioned out?" Um, so, I think that the right way is to decide the reason why, understand the message, rally the management that is going to be having to deliver this news so that we explain that why to them. So when they're in front of a person looking at them in the eyes and they know they've just bought a house and they know they've just, have booked a dream vacation or whatever, that they can understand the why of why they're giving the person that news, how to do it, and in the right order. So what I mean by that
Yes.
is you need to understand the structure of the organization to say,
Hmm.
"Hey, how are we equipping the managers? Are managers affected? So how are we preparing the people that need to deliver the message?" And
Yes.
not only that, if I'm meeting with Jane, does Jane have a family member in the organization? Does she have a
Right.
spouse? How do we make sure we take care of that person as well? So for me, I believe that the communication, when I'm involved in it, it's more than just the pure, "Oh, I'm taking care of the communication." I'm trying to take care of everything around it. How are the managers? How are we helping them deal with it? It's not fun to do this. Okay. How are we dealing with the employees affected that are leaving? How are we dealing with the employees who remain, that their best friend is being let go? And we know there are some really tight relationships between colleagues. How do we keep them inspired with what's next? You know? So to me, there's absolutely a right way of doing this, and it's treating people like human beings. And when I hear
Yeah.
about, and my colleagues and comms hear about one email that goes out and nobody
Yes.
even sits with them to explain,
Mhm.
"Listen, this has nothing to do with your performance. In this case, we're having to make some changes in the organization and your role has been affected."
Yes.
Some people have been there for 10, 15.
Exactly.
Don't they deserve to hear it
Yeah.
from their boss and not get an email from a
Mhm.
faceless sender.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm so glad that that is exactly how you process that because that's how I processed it as well, and having had to lead those conversations in my past as well, I totally agree with you. There is 100% a right way, and oftentimes we'll hear the and I'm gonna use the word excuse even though it sounds harsh. We use the excuse, "Well, we're a global organization," or maybe, "Well, we have employees spread throughout." I worked for an amazing organization who had to go through a massive transition, and several people's jobs were going to be impacted across the globe. And guess what? We flew people around the globe to be there. We did workshops with the managers whose jobs were going to be eliminated as part of that reduction in force as well. But they needed to lead through that because exactly what you said. We needed that message to come from the people they trusted the most, which was their frontline manager, and really wanting to hear that. And it was difficult, but in the organizations where this has been done right, the outcome of the employees who do remain, I think, is a much more as positive as it can be in those scenarios because what you've actually done is built psychological safety. You've increased the trust in the organization. You feel like there's transparency, and you are willing to take it to the next level, right? To do what needs to be done to carry that organization forward because you realize sometimes hard decisions have to be made in companies and they're hard to communicate. But when you're treated with respect and humanity, you have a tendency to be as supportive as you can in those situations, right?
Absolutely. I think, it really all comes down to respect. So, when I say there's a right way to do this, you approach the file with respect. You think about each individual. You think about how, like you say, who's the right person to sit with them. Because in some cases, it can happen that there's a few people receiving the same message at the same time, and you can't use the same manager because they're down the hall delivering the same.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
have to say, okay, so and so can't do it because they're with this person. Who's the next best person? So, I'm sure when you're on the receiving end, it's just so, I think they say like losing your job, it comes in second after losing a loved one in the most difficult
Yeah.
situations that you live. So, it's definitely worth taking the time to do it well. And for those people, as it happens, I'm sure it's the last thing they're thinking about, as well it should be the last thing they're
Yes.
thinking about. But to your point, at some time down the road, I think the most we can hope for is for people to say, like, I didn't want to lose my job, but you know what? They treated me as well as they could have in the process.
Yes.
If you get that reaction at some point, then to me, it's been done well or properly.
I have exciting news. The Her Resources podcast is opening sponsorships. If your brand supports women in HR and leadership, think talent, well being, learning, pay equity, coaching, productivity, or mission driven tech. This is your moment. Our listeners are decision makers and change makers who show up for real conversations and practical tools every week. We offer flexible options, pre-roll or mid-roll host reads, series sponsorships, and thought leadership integrations that highlight your story without the fluff. Ready to connect with a highly engaged audience and grow with us? Email contact@herresourcespodcast.com and put sponsorship in the subject line. I can't wait to collaborate. I completely agree with you. I think that makes a big difference, and it also leaves the employees who remain, who oftentimes have a little bit of survivor guilt, and wondering, gosh, it could have been me, why wasn't it me, that go through that. When they see that their colleagues were treated with respect and humanity, it does also leave them in a better place to manage through those situations as well. And that's the other side of it, is that the other thing that I've seen really good organizations do is to then have the resources available to help support the people who are still remaining. Because if you've made that transition and you're reducing headcount, you have to figure there's a reason, which means that everyone has to rally, that you've got to rally the troops. And if you don't have that type of trust and humanity and employees feeling behind it, you may not get the result that you were hoping for after you let all of these people go, because now the people that are left behind are not necessarily feeling highly motivated to support the organization. So
100%. Agree.
yeah, no. All right. So that was like very bummer type, but I think it needed to be talked about because it's such a hot topic right now. I am curious, the other big hot topic that is happening, and I'm curious your thoughts on what your colleagues are thinking about this as well, the role that AI is playing in communication. Are we relying too heavily on AI to be our communicator now? How much should you not be looking to that? Because I do think that it's a marvelous tool. I'm a huge proponent of AI, but I think there's also good and bad. It's like anything, right? There's a responsible way to utilize this technology. What are you seeing in the world of communication as it relates to AI?
I think people are using AI a lot for content creation. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
in communication, it can help keep pace when you have, like everybody else, a long list of to-dos. I think that it has to be checked. We know that we can't just take something. Um, where that concerns me is some of the more junior roles. So typically, when you're coming up through communications, you start by working on that newsletter or create, we didn't call it creating content back then, but creating content.
Right.
um, I think that, I'm probably gonna repeat something that that you've heard before, is that I tend to think AI is not gonna come for your job, but the people who know how to use AI really well will come for your job. So, I think we can also, we're talking about some messaging, whether it be for the new tech platform, whether it be for a reorganization. Well,
Yeah.
you can also use AI to test your messaging. You can
Good
put in
point.
a prompt that says something like, I work for this type of organization in retail. We have X number of, over 300 point of sales across the country. We're going to be, making an announcement on a new tech platform. Here are my messages. Critique them for me. So, I think that there are ways to use AI, and I
Yeah.
think those senior professionals in communications who have that strategic edge, that are able to speak to their C-suite and say, people weren't ready for cost constraints because we don't tell them what's going on enough in the organization about how we're performing. AI won't do
Right.
that.
Mm-mm.
So I think, not just what I think, what I know. I was just recently at an International Association of Business Communicators conference, and we talked. There were so many sessions about AI. Is you have to really push that strategic ability as a communicator, because that's what's going to help you stand out. That's, knowing your business, knowing the players, speaking in business terms, not just in communication terms. The same can be said about HR these days too. Um,
Yes.
so it's really setting yourself up for success as a business leader, that AI is not going to come and be able to replace that. Can they get out a story about, I don't know, uh, health and safety quickly when you put
Yeah.
in bullets and they put together? Yes. So
Yeah.
to me, let's use the tool to our advantage to help us keep pace. I would caution, be careful about tone, and, I know you
Yes.
teach AI to learn the tone and learn, but, um, for me, we definitely still have our place, and, it's really resides with that strategic part of the function that we can offer.
I totally agree. I love that that was how you are sending that message out to everyone because I like to remind like you've got to embrace AI because it's here and it's not going anywhere and it is a really great opportunity in front of us, but it is still just another tool. It's another tool in your toolbox of all the many other things that you have, but it does not just automatically replace everything and everyone. It's just another tool to be used, and when used effectively and efficiently and properly, it can really be a huge benefit. So I love that that's what, and it's not surprising that there was so much conversation about that either at the conference. I don't doubt it. That's a hot topic on everybody's mind these days. So,
Yes.
Heather, what are the biggest blind spots leaders have when it comes to communication?
Um, I think the biggest blind spots are you said it so everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think sometimes I think a blind spot is people aren't interested. I've heard
Mm,
that in my career. People,
yeah,
"Oh, their role is this, they're not gonna care." Um,
yeah,
so, um, that's one for sure. Um, I think those are the main things that I'm
yeah.
thinking.
Those are two good ones.
Do
Yeah,
you
I
think
really
do you
like
think of any
those.
others?
No, I think those are really good. I like that, because you're right, and I like the one that you said is that they are not gonna care because I do think that there is this misconception that just because it's impacting another part of the organization that I shouldn't care about it, but if you're a part of the organization, everything matters, right? You want to understand all of those components, so I really like that, that one for sure, I think is a really good one. I'm curious from your perspective, what's one immediate shift that leaders can make in to really kind of close that communication gap?
I think, uh, asking for feedback, double checking that things are working.
Yeah,
Um, and one thing, I don't know that this closes the gap, but when I just mentioned, are people really gonna care? One
yeah,
thing that I think leaders, um, take for granted or should be maybe more open to, so I think employees wanna know more about who they are.
yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
What matters to them outside of business, and
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, I don't think that means they need to tell everybody their whole life story or
right.
go to places that are overly personal that they feel they don't
Yeah,
wanna share, but, your teams wanna know who you are at the heart of you, um,
yes,
and I think, when you know more about when leaders let their teams in a little bit, um and I'm not saying they should do this for this purpose, it's not manipulative, but
yeah,
when you understand who someone is, what's important to them,
hmm,
they care about why they care about it, you wanna give them even more of yourself, and it
yeah,
just strengthens trust. So,
yes,
I would add that to our conversation that leaders should, take time to uh,
yeah,
let not just yes, ask questions about your employees, get to know them too, it shouldn't be one-sided, but,
right.
like, share about you too.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. People do respond when they can. It humanizes the leader side of it, right? Because then you think of them as people who are also dealing with tough decisions or kids growing up or empty nest syndrome or taking care of. We forget that all of the things we're going through, those leaders are probably going through as well. But when they don't share any part of themselves, then it just looks like a talking head. My husband uses that term all the time, or the talking heads, and so, and that is kind of what I think you end up seeing is that you don't view them as people any more than you feel like maybe they're viewing you as people. So that's really great advice for sure. I like that one. If every leader could follow one rule when it comes to communication, what do you think it would be?
Be yourself. Um,
I like that one.
it sounds really basic, but communicate the way that's natural to you. Don't try to be someone else. Don't, like respond to coaching, be open to it. But at the end of the day, if something doesn't feel natural to you, it will not come off natural to whoever you're communicating with. So, so really find that sweet spot that feels right for you and remember that it's always a two-way conversation.
Yes, yeah, yep, I do like that because one of the things that I think that leaders have a misstep on is they say that they have an open door policy, they say that they want to hear feedback, but then when they get it, they don't really want any of that, or their door really is not as open as they thought that it was. And so, in those cases as well, if you don't really mean it, don't say it because it's better for you to not say you have an open door policy and then have the door closed, or to say, I want to hear your feedback, but I don't really. I'd rather you not say those things than you would tell me that. And then when I give you that, you don't really receive it. So,
I love that. I totally agree with you. It wouldn't have been my first answer, but I think it's so true. It's like, do what you say what you do.
yeah.
So yeah, if you're not going to do anything with the feedback, don't ask for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, it's so important, for sure. Heather, how can people get in touch with you if they want to?
Um, I would love for people to reach out to me through LinkedIn. So if you type in Heather Redfearn, that's with FEARN, because that throws people off. Please reach out to me through LinkedIn. I'm on there often, and if you message me, I'm never going to miss it. And I'm sure when it comes time to put this out, we can maybe add other ways to reach me, like my email if necessary.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yes.
but really, I would say LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me.
Wonderful. And yes, we'll put all of Heather's information in the show notes, as well as share a little bit more about Heather's background because she is just an expert in communication. And I'm always so happy to have her on the show with us for sure, as she brings such an amazing perspective. For all of our listeners out there, if there's one thing to take away from today's conversation, it's this: communication is not about what you say, it's about what your people understand, believe, and trust. And as leaders, that's your responsibility. Now, a lot of leaders will look to employee surveys or pulse checks to tell them whether or not they're effective communicators. But let's be honest, most employers are not answering those surveys as openly as we think that they are. Some don't trust that they're anonymous, some don't believe anything will actually change. And right now, many people are thinking about job security, not radical honesty. So, if that's the case, we have to ask a better question. Not what did the survey say, but if someone was communicating this to me, would I believe them? Would I feel informed? Would I feel clarity? And would I trust what I'm hearing? And I love that Heather talked about that one on one communication. Go find out. Ask the questions. Don't just rely on the survey data. Because if the answer to no is no to those questions, that's really where the work begins for you as a leader. Some key takeaways from all of you today is that transparency is not the same as clarity. If people don't understand why, they will create their own. Leaders often overestimate how well they are communicating. Withholding information erodes trust faster than difficult truth builds it. And great communication is a leadership skill, not a personality test. So here's my challenge to all of you out there. Don't ask yourself, did I communicate that? Ask yourself, did my team actually understand the way I intended? And more importantly, would I believe me if I was communicating that to me? If you found value in today's episode, make sure to like, follow, and share the Her Resources podcast with someone who needs to hear this conversation. And as always, thank you for being a part of the Her Resources community. And thank you, Heather, for always being such an amazing guest.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.